Hey there, night owl. You've made it to bedtime, and tonight's story is a little darker than most. Not dragons, not knights, not noble kings. No, tonight's story is about children, real ones. Small, hungry, confused, slightly smelly children. The unlucky kids who found themselves alive in the middle of the greatest catastrophe Europe had ever seen. The Black Death. Now, before you panic, don't worry. There are no pop quizzes, and I'm not about to recite Latin chronicles at you like a disappointed monk. No, we're doing this differently. Think of me as the world's worst babysitter, whispering history in your ear until you fall asleep. Except instead of Goodnight Moon, you're getting Goodnight Medieval Europe. So, it's 1348. Bells toll, candles gutter in the night. Across villages and cities, half the grown-ups are gone. Some children wake up to find both parents dead. Some wake up to find their entire street silent. Imagine being 7 years old and discovering that you've basically won the world's most depressing lottery, survival. Congratulations, little one, you're alive, which means now you get to discover what daily life looks like when you're a medieval orphan. Spoiler, it's not Disney. There are no friendly talking mice. There is only bread, chores, and trauma. So, what happens when your parents die of plague? Do you get a kindly foster family? A warm cottage by the fire? Adoption papers signed by a beaming medieval judge? Ha! Absolutely not. Some orphans were scooped up by monasteries or convents. The monks and nuns meant well, but picture this: a drafty stone hall, 40 children crammed together, 2 spoons between them, and soup so thin it's basically hot water with an onion floating in it like a shipwreck survivor. Your blanket? Scratchy wool that hasn't been washed since your grandmother was a child. Your bed? Straw, shared straw, with fleas, and possibly the occasional rat. Congratulations! You live in holiness now. Others got sent to relatives. Relatives, in this case, usually meant the one aunt who didn't manage to run away fast enough when people asked for volunteers. She'd take you in, sigh heavily, and immediately put you to work. Not fun kid chores like feeding chickens. No, real jobs. Scrubbing pots so blackened with soot they looked like dragon eggs. Carrying buckets of water heavier than your body weight. Picking stones out of wheat until your fingernails turned gray. And let's be honest, medieval relatives didn't take you in out of kindness. They took you in because free labor is free labor. If you complained, they'd just shrug and remind you that at least you weren't dead in a ditch. Comforting. And if you had no relatives, the parish took you. The medieval church loved to help orphans, except their help came with rules, endless rules. Pray here, sit there, don't touch that. Say the Lord's Prayer exactly 7 times before breakfast, or we'll assume you're possessed. The parish technically cared for you, but really it just warehoused you like a slightly noisy sack of potatoes. Medieval people had advice for everything, none of it good. If the child cries too much, bury him in herbs up to the knees. If the child looks pale, feed him boiled cabbage. If the child looks too cheerful, he's definitely possessed. Sprinkle salt on his head before the devil gets ideas. If you were lucky, someone tied charms around your neck. A walnut carved with a prayer, a scrap of wolf fur, a lead trinket shaped like a saint. Did they protect you? Of course not, but they made adults feel like they were doing something. Diet advice was even worse. Don't eat cabbage, it causes flatulence and rebellion. Don't eat eels, they make you slippery. Don't eat rabbit meat or your eyes will go wild. And heaven forbid you touched pears. Why pears? Nobody knows. someone once declared pears dangerous, and that was the end of it. So what did you eat? Bread, more bread, occasionally apples, maybe some beans if the adults were feeling generous. Bread was your breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and dessert. And if you were extra blessed, you got cheese. Medieval cheese, rock hard, suspiciously fragrant, but technically food. Imagine being 6 years old, hungry every day, and hearing adults argue over whether a pear would summon demons. That was medieval nutrition science.
Let's go deeper into food, because nothing defines daily life like what's in your stomach, or more often, what isn't. Dinner went like this. Day 1, stale bread. Day 2, stale bread dipped in water. Day 3, onion soup so thin you could see your reflection in it. Day 4, bread again, this time with mold. The mold was considered extra vitamins. If you lived with monks, you might get a turnip, a single turnip split 12 ways. If you lived with an aunt, you might gnaw on whatever bones she'd already picked clean. And if you lived with no one at all, well, you got very good at stealing apples. There were no snacks, no candy, no treats. The closest thing to dessert was maybe licking the honey off the bottom of a communal pot if you got there before the flies. And yet somehow, children survived. They learned to nibble bread slowly, to pretend they were full so no one stole their portion, to dream about roasted meat the way modern kids dream about Disneyland. Childhood means toys, right? Wrong. If you were an orphan during the Black Death, your toy box looked suspiciously like the firewood pile. Your toys included a stick, another stick, a suspiciously sharp rock, and on birthdays, a slightly smoother rock. Sometimes you got creative. A chicken feather became a sword. A pile of mud was an entire kingdom. You invented games like Kick the Rat or Guess Which Neighbor Died This Morning. Grim, yes, but what else were you supposed to do when half your friends were gone? If you were in a monastery, your entertainment was chanting. All day, every day, Latin psalms you didn't understand, sung until your throat gave out. Want to play tag? Too bad. Want to play hide and seek? Good luck. The abbey only has 3 rooms. And yet, laughter existed. Kids always find a way. They teased each other. They mocked the monks' bald spots. They played in the mud even when adults scolded them for ruining their one good tunic. It wasn't a happy childhood, but it was a stubborn one. Now here's where things get really fun. At age 7 or 8, childhood was officially over. You were shipped off as an apprentice. No application form, no interview. Just, congratulations, you belong to the blacksmith now. Don't die. If you were a boy, you might end up hammering horseshoes for 12 hours a day, your hands blistered, your ears ringing from the endless clang of iron. Or hauling bricks for a mason until your back gave out before puberty. Or stirring vats of dye that stained your skin blue for a month. If you were a girl, congratulations, you're a servant. You scrub the floors with cold water until your knuckles split. You wash laundry in rivers that freeze your hands numb. You peel vegetables until you never want to see a turnip again. And here's the kicker. Apprenticeships weren't temporary. They lasted years, 7 years, sometimes 10. Imagine being 8 and realizing that your next decade is just carrying buckets for a man who yells at you when you breathe too loud. Still, there were perks. If you were very lucky, your master fed you better than the parish would have. Maybe a hunk of cheese, a slice of meat at Christmas, even ale. Yes, ale. Medieval kids drank beer. Not strong beer, but enough to make you stumble if you weren't careful. Congratulations! You're 10 years old and slightly tipsy. Let's talk about superstition, because nothing says bedtime story like a heavy dose of medieval nonsense. If you survived the plague while your parents didn't, people got nervous. Maybe you were cursed. Maybe you were blessed. Maybe you were secretly carrying death in your pockets like a mischievous little grim reaper. So, adults did what adults do best. They panicked. They tied garlic around your neck. They sprinkled holy water on you so often you smelled like a damp cathedral. They made you kiss saintly relics, bits of bone, scraps of cloth that were supposed holy but looked suspiciously like random garbage. Some believed you should never let orphans near mirrors. Mirrors confuse the soul, they said. Others believed you shouldn't let them sleep too deeply, or else the devil might crawl in through their dreams. So much for restful nights. Did any of this work? Of course not, but at least it gave everyone something to do while waiting for the next funeral.
Now, before you drift too deep into despair, let's pause. Not everyone was cruel. Sometimes a kind neighbor slipped a loaf of bread into your hands. Sometimes a nun gave you a second blanket, even if it meant she shivered at night. Sometimes a stranger took you in, even though feeding you meant less food for their own children. These moments didn't make headlines. Chroniclers didn't bother writing them down. But they happened. And for orphans, they meant everything. Picture it. You're starving, you're cold, and suddenly someone hands you an apple. Not moldy bread, not turnip soup, a real shiny apple. For a few minutes, you feel like the richest child alive. Those tiny kindnesses didn't erase the suffering, but they stitched small patches of humanity into a world that felt endlessly cruel. If you survived childhood, and that was a big if, you carried the scars with you forever. Your bones were stunted from hunger. Your teeth cracked from malnutrition. Your dreams haunted by memories of coughing parents and empty doorways. You grew up fast, too fast. By the time you were 12, you were less a child and more a very small, very tired adult. And yet, you lived. You learned a trade. You rebuilt the fields. You rang the church bells again. You laughed, married, had children of your own. You rebuilt the very world that had tried so hard to erase you. It's easy to forget that after the Black Death, Europe didn't just collapse. It reshaped itself. And much of that work was done by the children who'd been left behind, the quiet survivors, the ones no one expected to matter. So, as you close your eyes tonight, remember this. If you'd been born in 1348, you'd probably be curled up on a flea-ridden mattress, your stomach empty, your lullaby the sound of church bells tolling. But you would have survived. And survival would have mattered. Because history isn't just shaped by kings and queens. Sometimes it's carried forward by children who had nothing, who lost everything, and who still found a way to grow up. So, sleep well. Be grateful for your pillow. And if you hear bells in the distance, it's probably just your phone. Probably. Good night.